What would you walk away from 12 million bucks for? So I put some thought into this, and I'm gonna go with death, my family, or $12,001. Other than that, I'm keeping it. Money. Well, apparently the Cavaliers situation was so toxic that John Beilein went to the Cavs and said, I'm out and you can keep my 12 million bucks. His life must have sucked. The situation got so bad so fast that people say it was over in training camp. How is that possible? I did a dysfunctional video the other day featuring the Knicks, Pistons, and Kings, and I gotta be honest, the Cavs deserve their own video. I know some people are gonna say, hey, LeBron James left the team, of course they're gonna be bad. Oh no, there's bad, and then there's 4 head coaches in 1.5 years bad. That's a special kind of messed up. This video will break down exactly what the Cavaliers did to dig such a deep hole after LeBron and the insane details of John Beilein's relationship with his players. Hey guys, it's Casey Kiernan, host of the AM Hoops YouTube channel. Thank you so much for putting this channel at 25,000 subscribers just since the season started. If you don't subscribe, join us for 5 quality NBA videos Monday through Friday, dropping at 6 Eastern. Hit me up on Twitter at Casey Kiernan and follow me on IG at AM Hoops. All right, so I don't know how much of these songs I can play without getting a copyright claim, but do you recognize these 2 songs?
I need a house that's full of love when I need to escape the deadly places, slinging drugs and thugs, man. Thinking about that hanging, cutting my back and thugging with you.
Of course you do, because they're 2 rap classics. That first one, Thug's Mansion by Tupac. Thuggish Ruggish Bone by Bone Thugs and Harmony was the other one. And you know where I'm going with this. Yes, of course, the Thugs comment by John Beilein. Reports say that Cavs players started playing those songs and others whenever John Beilein was close enough to hear them. They were not gonna let it go. It didn't matter that he apologized for calling them thugs when he says he meant slugs. One player said, quote, "The worst part to me was not owning that he said it." Several players obviously didn't buy his excuse.
We met about it today, we apologized. I apologized about it today as well. It was not, never intended, and I think the players understand that now.
Yeah, they didn't. Now he's gone after about 9 months on the job. But John Beilein wasn't the problem in Cleveland. That franchise was a mess before he got there. You can trace most of it, if not all of it, to whoever sits in the GM chair. If you can believe it, Kobe Altman is the first GM that team owner Dan Gilbert has extended since buying the team in 2005. And he's had some good GMs. How is Kobe Altman the first guy he's given a contract extension to? Here's how. The first GM that he ever hired was a guy named Danny Ferry. Now, Ferry isn't in the league anymore because of some racist emails that leaked in Atlanta. But you can say about that guy, he knew how to put a team together. Ferry was LeBron's first successful GM. He added talent and depth around LeBron. They made that finals run in 2007, and Dan Gilbert let him go at the end of his contract. He went to the Hawks. In Atlanta, his coach was Mike Budenholzer. They put together a 60-22 season, the 1 seed in the East. And again, Dan Gilbert let that guy go. Eventually though, he made a good hire. He brought in David Griffin. Griffin was loved by players, LeBron James especially. He put together a team that made the finals every year and took down the 73-win Warriors. Dan Gilbert let him go at the end of his contract. LeBron James was reportedly pissed that the team owner let David Griffin walk. When ESPN actually called the Cavs player to ask about the GM leaving, he responded, "Griff is leaving?" Yeah, he let the GM walk without consulting the players. And we all know that on LeBron James teams, like it or not, you consult LeBron James. But even if he did consult with LeBron, do you know what's more messed up than all of that? Dan Gilbert robbed David Griffin of other jobs. Literally, the Hawks and the Magic went to Dan Gilbert and said, "Hey, can we interview David Griffin about jobs in our front office?" And he said, "No, you can't." Then a few months later, he let them go. That is so messed up. Griffin, of course, eventually landed on his feet after a little TV work. He is in New Orleans, He took over just in time to draft Zion and make that massive trade with the Lakers. So the issues in Cleveland actually started before LeBron left. When Gilbert let Griffin walk, by the way, Griffin was in the middle of negotiating with the Bulls to get Jimmy Butler and with the Pacers to get Paul George and maybe Eric Bledsoe in a 3-team trade after Kyrie Irving said he wanted out. Gilbert and Griff couldn't agree on the direction of the franchise, so he left. Am I crazy, or shouldn't the basketball people decide the basketball stuff? Do you know how hard it would be for LeBron to leave Cleveland again if David Griffin was still his GM and they had either Jimmy Buckets or PG-13? Imagine if they had just won another title with all those guys. How could LeBron leave for LA? I think there is a real chance none of this mess ever happens and Cleveland is still in the finals every year if Dan Gilbert hadn't let David Griffin walk. But oh no, Gilbert wanted a different direction. Now you kind of get Dan Gilbert's thinking. At the time he's like, I don't want to trade for those guys, I want something for the future because I basically know LeBron's gonna leave. And if LeBron leaves, Jimmy Butler and Paul George aren't gonna re-sign here. I want something for the future. I don't want to just be left with nothing and be screwed. Well, guess what? You're screwed either way, Dan Gilbert, and maybe you could have had a second title with LeBron there. So the guy who replaced David Griffin is Kobe Altman, the current GM. He's the guy that actually made that Kyrie Irving trade and extended Kevin Love, etc. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad GM, but here are the facts. Number one, he never built a relationship with LeBron James, who was mad about Griffin leaving, Kevin Love, who clearly doesn't like him after that shouting match this year, and he fired Ty Lue, their only championship coach ever after just 6 games. Those are 3 pretty important guys to not have on your side. Now, I can see why you would extend Kevin Love. With him on your books, he either plays well for you or he's an asset you can trade elsewhere, kind of like D'Angelo Russell with the Warriors, right? Well, where this went wrong is Kevin Love's trade value. He doesn't have any. And number 2, that Kyrie Irving trade. Now, some of you are going to say it's bad because the main vet they got back was Isaiah Thomas and he was injured. But look, IT is not why they made that trade. They did it for the draft pick, which ended up being number 8 overall in Colin Sexton. That is why it was a bad trade. And number 3, why did Kobe Altman draft Darius Garland again? He and Sexton play the same position and they've both underwhelmed. Can you believe that despite having 2 top 10 point guards, they're 25th in assists per game as a team? Garland leads them in assists at 3.8 per game. 3.8! That's embarrassing. Next, you can argue that trading for Andre Drummond was a stupid idea too. Yeah, basically all they gave up was that 2nd round pick, but that's almost as good as a first with how bad these Cavs are. Plus, are you a young rebuilding team or a veteran team? Again, I'm confused. And that brings us to the hiring of John Beilein. In the past, Dan Gilbert has tried to hire college coaches. John Calipari, Bill Self, Tom Izzo. He did hire a European guy in David Blatt. For some reason, Gilbert's not into the whole hiring an NBA coach thing. Beilein was a 67-year-old guy who coached high school and college for 40 years. He didn't know how to relate to professionals. Reports say he ran Cavs training camp like a college camp. He screamed at guys, made them practice long hours.
We've got 2 or 3 times today, right? People wanted to win, but you're doing stuff you can't do in games. Our practice are going to be disciplined like games.
It's partly why Darius Garland and Dylan Windler got hurt in the preseason. One player said, quote, he was a dictator, not a coach suited for today's NBA. That really puts it in a nutshell. Or this. At one point, the Cavs weren't playing on Christmas Day. John Beilein considered practicing on Christmas Day. Then there were things that the old Michigan coach just couldn't accept about the league. He didn't understand why players would miss games or practice with soreness. Reports say he was upset when they traded Jordan Clarkson. He talked for days afterward about why would the team trade one of the few players who could actually score, you know, when the season was obviously trash already. Understandably, the players who had the biggest issue with John Beilein were the veterans. Kevin Love showed his frustration in public, horrible body language on the court, and on the bench. He got in that shouting match with GM Kobe Altman. He even screamed about Beilein's age. Tristan Thompson was on Beilein's side, then off it. He wanted to be traded before the deadline, leaving money on the table. And one of the last details we got was about the newest vet, Andre Drummond. Reports say that Drummond found Cleveland even more dysfunctional than Detroit. He promised he would not re-sign there if John Beilein was still head coach. And that's really the lesson in all of this whole Beilein situation. Unlike college, the NBA is a players' league. Their voice is much louder than the players in college, where the head coach is the man. But again, the problems in Cleveland go way beyond John Beilein, and there's no telling when they're gonna dig themselves out of this giant hole they find themselves in. Support AM Hoops and click subscribe. Don't miss a daily NBA video.